actually separate questions. So why is Verizon back at Neelsville for the third time after being told no by the community? So I'm assuming that the no from the community has taken place. I was part of it, so I can't necessarily say so. But I think I did hear you say that there's been several applications, and you talked about that a little bit before.
This project was approved by the superintendent in 2008. In March 2008, he sent a memo or a letter to the Maryland National Capital Park Planning Commission recommending mandatory referral. Was then supposed to go to zoning. Verizon pulled back at that time because of the recession and changes in demand. So technically this project was approved by a superintendent at the time.
Well, see, that was my point. So the superintendent approved it, so it sounded like to me the PTSA at that time did not approve it, so.
Oh, no, they
No,
said.
we have a letter at that time, it was the next meeting, and we did not approve it. When they had to go back through the whole process again, we said, no, thank you.
Well, they went through the process a couple of years later when Verizon came back, and we had in 2015, and again, PSTA support, and then we had the public meeting in July in 2015.
Do you have anything that validates that? The reason why I asked-
Can we get letters, get information?
I think it was April 2015, I don't know if there's a record of it.
Yeah, I did not, as the principal here, I don't have a record because
We
it was
need
the
that.
PTSA. But the PTSA did approve it at the time.
I was at
Is
that
there
meeting and I was
documentation?
no vote.
All the PTSA records were missing on
You
this.
see? No
We don't
records.
have any.
So that
So
doesn't
we
stand.
can
I
say
was
that
at the
we-
meeting. There wasn't a vote that I know of.
I was at the meeting too.
March
It is
2016,
possible
is
that
that?
there might have been a meeting.
Well, that's when the
but there was
memo
no vote.
came out.
Yeah,
That was just a reaffirmation.
Right, of the school's support for Verizon Wireless proposal to install telecommunications monopole. Community meeting was held at our school in July 2015 to notify neighbors. Our school staff did not receive any objections to the project from that meeting, so. so that's
Did
when
not
the
receive any
principal-
objections, wasn't a vote, okay. No vote.
That was the community meeting,
That's
we
the
don't
com-
require a
That's the
vote.
community meeting. We don't get
I
a
guess-
vote at the community.
Let's
What's the
just,
community meeting for?
I guess, set the record. As far as the policy, you're not
Yeah.
required to do a vote. We're just supposed to get input and feedback. If you want to vote, you can vote it. I mean, you're a school of 900, and people that support it are probably not going to come running in. It's just kind of the nature
Why
of it.
not?
When over 90% of the population is using that device you're holding in your hand.
You know what?
think we're
It's
getting
not
off
a
the
cell
point.
tower on top of a school.
It's not going on top of the school. It's going on the outskirts.
And if it falls over, it's hitting the school, it's
It's
close.
a big deal, it's still at a school.
Wheaton now has it up against the wall because the school was modernized and the building was built right up to the edge of the cell tower, and that's a student hangout right there. Once you put it on school property, it's permanent forever, and it ties up public school
I
land.
wanted to add one thing about the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Yes, go ahead and do that, and then I want to bring us back to where we are now. No, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
you mentioned that, and I went to their website too, which is on your website, which is neatly fits into a mobile device for Wi-Fi. If younger people are using their phone, they recommend don't use it with a weak signal. So an antenna is going to provide a stronger signal, because if the phone works harder, and Mr. Newton can explain it better than me, it's giving off more RF if the phone has to work harder to find a signal. That's the nature of it, so.
Can I just say something?
Yes, and that'll be the last one until I bring us back to where we need to be.
The coverage that you're saying is needed is actually not for your basic cell phone service like when you call emergency, right? It's LTE. I was looking at those maps that you have. So cell phones seem to work fine. This is about data and the future. And just wanted to raise that issue. And also, you don't have to be directly underneath a tower to have a lower, what I want to say is, it doesn't have to be right there, okay, to get the signal that is going to be clear. Now, I would recommend reducing all radio frequency exposures, and that's what the American Academy of Pediatric recommends reducing radio frequency exposures to children. So I just want to point that out, and actually, you can go online and read more about that. I'll stop for now.
So, in terms of PTSA support and all of those things, so we have looked through the records of the PTSA that were handed to us, and we could not find any record of a vote to support or oppose the cell tower. So I have not found a person who has said we were at a meeting where a vote took place. And everyone who has said we were at meetings has said none of them had a vote. So what that tells me is that we can't validate a vote. Now, that doesn't affect your policy necessarily, so I want to point that out to everyone as well. What it does is it says, what does this group of people do? So in January, when we found out that that this was being proposed, then we said, okay, well, we need to have a position of some sort as a group. That's not my opinion or her opinion or somebody else's opinion, but it represents the group. So we did have some discussion, we did have a vote, and the result of that vote was, and I'll just read this, I'm not gonna read the whole thing, I'm gonna read two pieces to clarify it. As of this writing, the Neelsville PTSA does not support the placement of a cell phone tower, nor has it adopted an affirmative position against it. So that's very clear, neither for nor against, but it does not support. And that was because we didn't want the claim to be that there was current PTSA support for the current application. The position of the Neelsville PTSA is that no cell tower shall be placed on the property of Neelsville Middle School unless and until support and approval is given by an affirmative current vote of the membership. So that then, it kind of makes a lot of the past a little bit irrelevant. I won't say entirely irrelevant, but for the purpose of this meeting, it means that we have a new application on the table that prior support would not apply to. And we have a new and current PTSA that may support or oppose the current application. So for the purpose of what we're talking about here, what we need to be thinking about is, there's a present application on the table, there is a present PTSA, and this PTSA needs to have a position, either say, let this thing fly through, we love it, or we want to come against it, and then how much if you do want to come against it. And that is irrespective of MCPS policies, zoning policies, or anything that did or didn't happen in the past, because it starts over as of January. All right. All right, so I'm going to throw out a few related health and safety related questions. So one of them is, what risk is there for the students what risk is there for the students, and will they be safe and have good health? And I'm going to add to that this next one, which is it the position of Verizon and MCPS, so directed to each individually, that the cell tower at Neelsville will have no adverse effect and no adverse health impact on Neelsville Middle School students?
So I'm gonna just jump in and, what we can tell you is that the proposed tower will meet and be far below the standards that the FCC sets up for acceptable human exposure, okay? You've heard a lot of information on the other side of that issue. This is not really the forum for that issue to be decided. And Teresa knows that that's the FCC's purview. We are following what we have to do under the law to comply with the FCC guidelines. You've heard from Paul that we will be hundreds of times below what we are allowed to be at. When you say, will the students be free from risk and they'll have good health, you also heard tonight that, you know, a body is a body and has lots of competing forces coming at it. I can't tell you that the students here will or will not have good health because I don't know what these students are doing. But I can tell you that this site meets and goes beyond what's required in order to meet those safety standards of the FCC. So, you know, if you don't like the standards, then you go to the FCC and try to get that changed. That's not our job. We are doing our job in that regard.
So let me, restate and slightly reframe the question specifically for Boyd. Is it your opinion, or your office's opinion, or MCPS's opinion, that putting the cell phone tower up here will not have an adverse effect on the kids? Now, if their health, their diet has an adverse effect and all that, put that aside, but,
But a
it's
cell
just,
phone's
in your
on.
opinion, your office's
Mhm.
opinion, is it your position that it doesn't?
Well, if you want to explain the RF better, but for us, from a locational perspective, we believe it's a good site because it's on the side of the building services part of the building. It's not near common activity area. It's closest thing are dumpsters and building services parking lot, gravel parking lot. That's kind of why the site was, and I'd be happy to walk out there. We could.
Are you aware that in the proposed renovation of the building, which actually is not gonna happen right now, but may happen in the future, they're putting infants and toddlers back there?
I've had our architect look at the project. He hasn't mentioned that.
That was
one
never,
of-
that was a proposal, but that was
Well,
never.
that was one of the proposed,
Yeah.
places to put infants and toddlers was on the back side of the school so that they would have their own parking lot.
Well, part of the lease, I just want to address two parts of that. When we enter a lease, the landlord, who would be MCPS, is making a statement that they have the authority to enter the agreement. And that document is binding, and I don't think the county would be entering into a lease if there was a question at all that property was not gonna be available, because then they have a problem under their lease as the landlord. And I also wanted to just sort of from a technical standpoint explain that part of the conditional use process is we have to go through a series of proof of whether or not there are adverse effects at this location and how those are met, or not met, but how those are addressed, because a conditional use is a legislative determination that what are acceptable levels of effects at a certain property for a certain use. So that is another element that we have to go through as part of our due diligence on the application. And I think, Paul, did you have something you said you wanted to add?
I don't want to go back into an RF discussion, but I just wanted to say, as a registered professional engineer, my first priority is to hold paramount the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And I wouldn't support or be behind any project that I thought would be detrimental to human beings, including children.
Thank you.
So, I'm lost again. What is this about infant and toddlers? So, are they gonna be coming put on this property, or?
They are here.
They're here already?
Already here.
They're in that part.
Is the program
Oh my
that
goodness.
is in that, small building that's,
To
you know
the
where
left
the
of
bus
Jackson.
lane is, and it's on the right side of the bus lane as you come towards the school.
You know how there's like a separate building from us before you get to our main entrance?
Like when you pull in the driveway, you pass it
Between
for toddlers
here
and then you
and
come to the school.
tennis courts. It's a building between the gym and the
Okay.
tennis courts.
Ms. Park,
been there.
It's a facility
Uh,
that houses a
is there
program
any,
where
is
they
there any
help the
restriction that
Second.
Hang on,
the
hang on.
students
Down.
cannot venture
somebody
around?
is-
We have somebody already.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The infants and toddlers program, she knows more about it than I do, but my understanding is that it's a program where they take, children that have special needs, and they house them in this, building for, instruction, and, it's a very large program that actually
daycare.
is in this small building.
No, it's not a day.
No, it's not a daycare.
No,
No.
it's not daycare, it's
Uh-uh.
a instructional,
Yeah.
and they help overcome, disabilities and things, correct?
Yeah, we work with, actually, we work with families, children and families, with delays or disabilities, developmental delays or disabilities. We have about 70 to 75 staff members in that little teeny tiny building over there. And we do have classes and meetings and therapies that happen in that building. Most of our, I'm gonna be honest, most of our, direct work with children and families happens in their home. There are lots of families that live near here, but we do have lots of families that do come to our site. Most of our work is done not in that building, though.